Hello and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? You know it, because I hate small talk. So my guest today knows all about talking. She is absolutely fantastic. Maria Incontrera is the CEO and founder of Incontrera Consulting, which is a thought leadership and consulting agency, but she's also an author, a creative professional, and a producer. She works with thought leaders on leveraging their online presence through social media, podcasts, TEDx talks, and other speaking opportunities. But wait, there's more. That was her official bio that she sent me. Here's what you really need to know. She's also a jazz musician. She skates roller derby, and she's producing a TV movie. Kind of fascinating. So we're going to talk about all of these things today. Marie, welcome to Big Talk.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. It's great to be here.
So your business, right? The consulting business really revolves around helping people find their voice, getting from page to stage, getting their social media out there, giving them a presence, building their brand. So I gotta ask, how'd you find your voice?
Well, so a lot of my story has to do with somebody who we both know, Dorie. Dorie Clark.
Dorie Clark.
So when I met her, I was a working jazz musician in New York City, and the thing they don't tell you in school is that you could be playing Carnegie Hall, which I was, and you could be coming home with $15,000 a year if you're lucky. And I had the big band in New York for avant-garde jazz, for living jazz musicians. We were really doing some innovative stuff. We were being recognized, and I was just completely burnt out and completely broke, and all that, and working every odd job that I could in order to survive in New York, right?
So you made it. You're at the top of your game.
Exactly.
And it's $15,000 a year.
Exactly. Living in a little studio with just a bed and a piano, no time for anything else. The classic starving artist story. So one day I'm at this odd job that it was particularly awful. And just to drive home the drama, I'm sitting at work, I hate my life, and I get a text message, and it's from Dorie, and she says, "I have an idea for you to quit your job." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" And I had told her how stressed out I was, and her answer was always, "You don't get paid enough to be this stressed out," And it turned out that she had a plan behind what she was saying. She wasn't just, willy-nilly telling me to quit. She was like, "Well, you could probably be a VA." And so I said, "Well, what do I have to lose?" And right away.
And for those who don't know Dorie Clark is a New York Times best-selling author and thinker about reinventing yourself. How do you recreate yourself? How do you build your career? How do you become a recognized expert out in the world? And if you want to know more about Dorie, I actually interviewed her on an earlier show because, like Marie, I do anything Dorie tells me, and I think she's amazing. So she sends you this text, and immediately you're thinking okay, that's insane, but also Dorie's brilliant. I should learn more. And you find out she has this plan.
Right, exactly. And it's kind of a funny thing because imagine telling your parents, "Hey, I'm gonna quit. My friend just told me I'm gonna quit my job." As you're a parent, how would you feel if your kid came home and said that? And so it sounded insane, but I realized she really knows her stuff.
Yes.
And I was miserable, and I was burnt out, and I was unhealthy, and I said, "Okay, well, let me try this, because if I don't try it, I'm going to regret it." And I, immediately started making more money than I had been. And over time, people started coming to me for the same things over and over again. And so I was able to transition into calling myself a consultant, right? And we've sort of grown year over year since then. And hey, look, Dorie was right.
She always is, right? So as a kid, had you always just dreamed about being a jazz musician? Was that always the plan?
Well, it was more classical. That was kind of I went to college for classical composition. After my master's degree, I started studying with a jazz composer, and he was terminally ill with stage 4 colorectal cancer, and he was sort of tasking people with his legacy. And so it felt very mission-based and I was actually in his will, where he left me all the physical copies of his scores. I, helped archive them after his death. And so it became this thing that I wasn't setting out to do, but I really fell in love with the medium, and it's still not all I do, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. That's really interesting. I mean, he sort of left you a gift and a burden at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was, especially living in that studio, right? Like for a while it was me, the piano, the bed, and all the scores.
All the
right?
scores. Yes. Yes.
So,
And were you interested in the business of running a business, like doing the VA thing and then growing? I launched my last business, my executive search firm, when my oldest child, who's now 18, was 6 weeks old, and I used to say like, well, I do executive search, but I never quite was comfortable saying like I run an executive search company until I had two contemporaneous clients, and then I was like, okay, now I'm legit, right? Like, you're just sort of like doing some side work, some hustle on the side when you have one client, but when you have two, that's a portfolio,
right.
But then I found that I actually, while I thought I loved search, I actually loved the business of running a business. And I found that to be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally. And I found, I approached my music career as a business. I was always very entrepreneurial with it. I produced my own stuff. The show at Carnegie Hall that I talked about, we raised grant money. We rented the hall, which by the way was like 3 times what I was bringing home for the year.
Right.
So I always approach things entrepreneurially. And so a lot of that translated into running my own business. And I resisted growing for quite some time. Actually, the first VA that I hired was my partner. And it was sort of out of necessity. And I was like, please, I'll pay you $20 an hour. Please just help me out when you're not working. And then eventually it grew from there. And now we have a whole team. So I probably could have expanded sooner. I resisted the like, okay, now I'm a business owner. Now I'm a boss.
But I think that's, I mean, you might say that you resisted growing, but you also probably learned a lot of lessons during that time so that when you did grow, it was better, right? I mean, it's like, and I think that there's so many interesting corollaries between creating music and building a business, right? I mean, it's like you get this like empty, sheet music and you got to fill things in. And, all of the pieces of the business are the notes and the melody and the, instruments. And then you have to figure out how they all work together, right? And like you could have people doing great, amazing individual contributor work, but if they're not working together as a team,
right,
it doesn't work. Right.
You're absolutely right. And it sounds like kind of a fun metaphor, but it's really true. In both, you have to create something from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You have a blank page for music, and literally the sky's the limit when it comes to entrepreneurship, because I had to create skills out of things I didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I had social media skills. I forget TEDx. I didn't know what that was until I found myself doing it. So it's the same thing.
And when you say doing it, do you mean like finding yourself on the stage, giving the talk?
No, I mean, so part of what, and this is another Dorie story. So she sent me a few early clients, and she said, I have a client for you. He wants to get booked on a TEDx stage. And I was like, what? And she was like, don't worry, you could do it. Just figure it out. It's all on the TED website. You got it, and I was like, okay, don't you have to be famous? Don't you have to do this, that, and the other thing? And when he hired me, I said, look, no guarantees. Let's try this for a month. And he was game and I was game. And by the end of the month, he had gotten booked for 2, one of which I pitched him for, one of which he had pitched himself for. And so we, more people came to me, and all of a sudden I was like the TEDx person. And so I really had to walk my talk and learn what it was. And that's how I built that part of my business.
And then at what point in this journey did you end up yourself on the TEDx stage in roller skates, by the way? Are you the only person? I mean, I've had 4 people so far on this first season who have had to reteach themselves how to walk but I don't think I've ever had anyone who's done a TEDx in roller skates, and I'm wondering if maybe you're the only one in the history of TEDx who's done a talk in roller skates.
Yeah, I'm not, but there's like two other people, maybe. Like
rare air.
So yeah, the reason I gave TEDx talk, I actually gave two within 2 weeks in 2018.
Yes.
And the reason I did that was because I realized I had to learn to walk my talk, right? I had to actually be on the stage if I was gonna, raise my prices and do this for real and really say I understood the process. And so I was playing roller derby at the time. I ended up getting too busy with work to continue because it really is a commitment. I mean, it was like 7 hours of practice a week plus travel time plus, games if you're playing or volunteering at games if you're not. So it ended up being too much of a time commitment. But yeah, I figured why not? I'll be one of the only people who's done a TEDx in roller skates. And I literally, it's funny, people will be like, oh yeah, you're that girl who did her TEDx talk in roller skates. And I literally just stood there in my skates.
I watched it and I kept expecting you to like bust out a move or something at some point. And I was all at once excited and also terrified for you.
Yeah.
It was going to go wrong.
So it was funny. I was planning to, but the rug was in pieces and it wasn't taped down or anything like that. So it would have been too dangerous for me to try to skate. But I did skate out and I got up onto the stage and like, it was so funny because I actually climbed up onto the stage in my skates and the entire crowd went, so I wish that was on camera. But it wasn't. And it was too unsafe for me to like try a move or anything like that.
How did you find your way to roller derby? That's not a, common sport.
Well, I have a background in martial arts and a friend and I went, a friend had tickets to a game and she was like, let's go. And I said, okay. And I knew what the sport was. But going, and seeing a game, I was like, oh, this is really cool. I could do it. And, I was at the point in my business where I was successful, but not quite as busy, as I was about to get. And so I said, I got, you know what, I got to try this. Like I was at the point where I could take off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the skating rink for 4 hours or whatever. So I had to relearn to skate.
You had to relearn to skate like from when you were like 12, you mean?
Yeah. Or, like in Barbie skates, just like walking in my skates along. So
yeah, I mean, skating's it's got a resurgence. It's become very hip all of a sudden. It's back. My son and I both bought skates. They're kind of like Barbie skates, actually.
Nice.
We're like skating around our garage together, and
that's awesome.
It's really hard. It's really
hard.
It's hard to just like skate, let alone like knock people out of the way and jump over them and score points and all the stuff you have to do in roller derby. But I have to admit, I've always been kind of fascinated by it because the women are amazing. They are so incredibly tough. And I know there's lots of people who play, but it is incredible to me to watch it as somebody who found my athleticism very late in life. Like I didn't run my first mile till I turned 39. So 10 years ago, I ran I was the first time I was there athletic. And I grew up thinking that, like fit was eating lean cuisines and drinking Tab and being skinny because, J-Lo and Kim Kardashian weren't alive when I was, an impressionable young girl. And all of a sudden now it's like, whoa, wait, you can have a booty, you can have muscles. This is amazing, right? Michelle Obama, fantastic. And so I ended up finding rowing, and it's such a liberating thing to find a sport where women are strong. Right? They're strong and they're tough and they're badass and they go to like the deep into the pain cave. It's pretty incredible.
Exactly. And it's funny because first of all, I'm a big person. You know what I mean? Like no matter how fit I am, I'm muscular. My body gets bigger when I'm fit. And there's nothing I can do about that, right? Like that's not changing.
Right.
No matter what, like I could diet from now until 5 years from now, I will still be a bigger, more muscular person. And in roller derby, I found a lot of people that looked like me.
Yes.
you know, and
And we're
being
grateful to look like you.
exactly,
Yes.
and being big was a good thing, and you know, having a derby butt was was a great thing, and you know, and like, so what I found was that I was actually really solid. You know, I was a solid blocker. I was one of those girls that was probably always going to be a little bit slower because just because of the way my body likes to work, and you know, good luck running into me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, I remember one of my earlier practices, because you first you learn to skate, then you do contact. One of my earlier contact practices, one of the more experienced girls came up behind me and she went to hit me and she bounced off me and fell back. All right, well, I guess that's what I'll be good at. And you know, it was that was a cool thing.
That's incredible. It's so interesting to me that so many of us spend a lot of our lives working so hard to fit into clubs that we don't even know we want to belong to and feeling
Right.
badly about ourselves that we don't. And then there's this watershed moment where you find the community that it really is. It's like you find, like, for the first time in your life, sometimes, for a lot of us in middle age, don't feel organ rejection.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah.
And so, for me, for me, like, I've always been an entrepreneur because I've never quite fit in anywhere else.
Yeah.
My friend Scott Stratton likes to say that entrepreneur is Latin for bad employee. And so
Oh
I
my
think,
God, I'm gonna use that.
right? I mean, I think that's pretty great. And for me, like, finding athleticism and joining a team when I've always been an entrepreneur, like figuring out team sport when I'm used to like going it
Mhm.
alone, was a real learning curve for me,
Yeah.
sort of in
Yeah.
midlife in terms of maturity. But you probably had that already because being in music and playing in bands, you're used to working with others.
Well, you'd be surprised. I mean, you know, the thing about music is that everybody, you know, even in a band, everybody is an aspiring soloist for the most
Mm,
part, right? So there's that's like a learning by fire of how to be a boss, how to be a team. You know, like
hmm.
I was the leader. I mean, I've heard people say things to me in music that, my gosh, my team would never say to me. You know what I mean?
What
So,
do you what do
so
you mean?
well, you know, it's
What, like, tell us some stories. Yeah.
the culture is so different. You know what I mean? There's more because it's a creative thing, because everybody's an aspiring soloist. There are a lot of strong personalities. You know, there's a lot of like, well, why did I get this solo and not this solo? Why did this person get this and I didn't? You know, why did we play this tune instead of this one? There's so much of that, and you know, I was one of only a few female band leaders in the country, and so that was a big learning curve of like how to be the woman in front of a room full of men, ignore all the other stuff. You know, you got to remember this was pre Me Too.
Mhm.
Like the culture just had such a different feel. And so I really had to learn. I had to learn by fire, you know. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, so I would imagine there's a slew of toxic comments that,
Oh yeah.
would have set our hair on fire. How did you learn to manage them? Did you laugh them off, or were you just did they affect you?
Um, you know, sometimes it did, sometimes they didn't. Like there were times I just blocked things out and was like, I didn't hear that, let's go, you know, like because the stakes were really high. The stakes were so high. You know, when you've paid $45,000 in fees and everything like that to rent Carnegie Hall, and someone says something to you backstage, you don't hear it, you
Mm,
know. um uh but sometimes, you know, you're in a jazz club, and the oh, here's a story for you. Actually, a female owned jazz club. We played some weird stuff. We were an experimental jazz band, and the owner of a jazz club was complaining about us while we were playing,
hmm,
like loudly in the audience, was like, this is garbage, this is disgusting. And I was like, I'm sorry, who do you think you are? You
hmm.
know? And I had to defend what we were doing. I had to defend, you know, my band. I I said what I had to say. And, of course, we never went back there, right? We wouldn't have been asked back, but we made the decision of like, okay, we don't get treated like this, so that's the kind of culture. I mean, I can't imagine that happening in a business setting, right?
Yeah, I like to think that we can't imagine it, and yet I think everyone's got stories of people saying things, and you're like, did that just come out of their mouth out loud? Did I just hear that even after Me Too? I mean, some of the things that we hear, and I think I often get comments from women who watch these or listening to these shows that are like, thank God you had that strong, powerful woman on here who talked about how she managed XYZ, because
Yeah.
I just had that happen to me last week.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart because like you, I'm now in a position where like I'm the leader.
Yeah.
I can tell
Yeah.
people to go screw off and get the hell out of my office, and I can fire clients. I have plenty of clients, but it wasn't always the case.
Right.
So there's that balance between, do I say something
Right.
and stand up for what I believe in? And
Yeah.
there's so few female band leaders in the country. I have to be exemplar, right? Like I have to
Yeah.
set a tone for the people who come after me. And also, we need this gig. We need this money. We rented this hall for $45,000, right? So how did you make the decisions about the times where you would say something and you wouldn't?
Well, a lot of it's like in the moment, seat of the pants, like I have to make a decision about this. And sometimes you do make the wrong decision, and what I find, it's interesting because very often it was like gig to gig, and maybe this is our only gig, or maybe this is the first time or the only time we're gonna play Carnegie Hall, or whatever it is, right? Or the first time we're gonna play the Blue Note, or whatever. Sometimes you'll take things because, kind of like what you were saying, you have a roster of clients. You could fire a client if they disrespect you. I'm the same way now. Like I'm good, right?
Mhm.
I'm not paycheck to paycheck. I'm not gig to gig. So I'm less willing to take crap than I was, and so I, looking back, sometimes there are things where I'm like, oh, I probably wouldn't have, but the times that I'm proudest of, and Me Too happened just as sort of we were I was starting to wind down the band because I was burnt out and tired and everything else. People that I had played gigs with, people that I had been in clubs with, people that, they were getting accused of things. And so I was like, okay, like I'm not, first of all, I'm not crazy, right?
Yes.
Like what I've been seeing is it's happening everywhere, and it's happening in our culture. And the times that I'm proudest of are the times that I actually stood up and said, no, no, you can't talk to wait staff like that. No, you can't yell at me because you didn't get a solo, right? There's another saxophone player waiting to take your spot, and it's scary because as a leader, like nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to say that today.
Right.
Whether it's business or music, nobody wants to have to say that to somebody else. So
Yeah, it's it's so interesting how Me Too happens and people you work with start getting accused, and your first reaction is, I'm not crazy. Isn't that crazy that so many
yeah,
of us women, our first reaction was, I'm not crazy. Oh, I feel
yeah,
so vindicated. Oh, it wasn't just me. I wasn't imagining it, right? We're so socialized that
yeah,
that was our first reaction, as opposed to like, hell yeah.
yeah.
Right, I saw that. And it's crazy. It's just that's so it's like it's so heartbreaking. So so you were a fairly fierce individual. Where did that come from? Were you fierce as a kid?
I have no idea where it came from.
Is there like a parent or a mentor, a teacher, a person of faith, or somebody that you had as a role model? Like, did you see people being fierce when you were younger?
No, I didn't. And I'll say that, I everybody in my family is like, I have no idea where you came from. Like, where did all this come from? Like, both my parents are blue collar. Both my parents are, as service workers. They both had city jobs. They were both very, very much not risk takers. all of my siblings are, well, no, that's not true. One of my brothers ended up starting a business after he retired from his like 20-year Teamsters job.
Yep.
You know, he was actually like wildly successful at it. And he was able to retire for good at 55 or something like that. So for like, I think there's like entrepreneurship in the blood, but nobody's really ever explored it. And I don't know. I feel like I woke up one day and was like, I'm going to try everything all the time. And I'm going to, you know, like, there was so much that I wanted to do that I knew I was going to do it come hell or high water.
Yeah, so you got the mutant gene, right?
Exactly.
You got the mutant gene, that like the weird gene that sort of lays low for years, and all of a sudden, like, you know, oh yeah, cousin Marie, like, yeah, we don't talk about her. We talk about her in whispered tones. You know, cousin Marie, she's the entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. Like she's the one who quit her job. Like,
I don't know what she does, but she's in New York.
Right. I don't know why people pay her, but they do. It's fine.
Yes, we're not quite sure what she's doing. You know, for years when I was doing executive search, I'd fly all over the world and I'd meet people and I'd interview them. And of course, I couldn't go to their offices because nobody wanted the headhunter to be walking into their office. So I'd meet them in hotel coffee shops. And I used to tell people that I got paid to meet strange men in hotel lobbies until my husband told me I wasn't allowed to say that anymore in public. So it's like, I'm not quite sure what she does, but she gets paid a lot of money to do it. And it involves meeting strange men in hotel lobbies.
It's funny because when I first started, I was with my mom. We were in the city, and a client sent me an email, and I got it on my phone, and I was, and you know, she was approving these like Canva designs I had done, which is something that I consider so simple. And my mom like saw the email, and you know, the client said something like, "I like what you did," or whatever, and my mom was like, "Oh, I'm so happy." And she goes, "I don't know why people pay you, but I'm so proud of you." I was like, what's happening?
Did you ever have any doubt along the way? Like, I should get a union job, I should do the thing, I should have the security, or was it always like you were always going to do something different?
Well, you know, I think so when I was in school, I actually started out with an education degree and you know, with a concentration in biology. And
okay, that's close to what you're doing now.
Yeah, and I was like miserable, you know, like miserable. And so I tried, because you know, you do want to, you know, you do want to please your family, you do want to please your parents, you know, my parents were very supportive, thank goodness, when I jumped ship and said, nope, I'm doing music, you know, I'm doing something else, anything else, you know, and you know, I think they do get, you know, my family does get scared. They're like, well, you know, what could happen next year? And of course, we're in coronavirus, right? Like the unprecedented thing, the scary thing that could have made me lose my job happened. And, you know, I'm okay. Thank goodness, you know, so, yeah, I definitely, I tried the normal, but
yeah. So you were like, I'm either going to teach prepubescent kids that are worth their weight in Clearasil how to dissect frogs for the rest of my life, or I'm going to play experimental jazz in dive clubs in New York City.
Right.
Option two. Okay, but so that wasn't experimental enough. You also are now becoming a movie producer.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. That's another left turn. You know, I think the most interesting people in the world, in fact, frankly, the only interesting people in the world are the ones who make these left turns and right turns and U-turns all throughout their life. And yet we are told, I mean, I wrote a whole book about it, right? We're told that God forbid you change anything. God forbid you step left or you step right. You might fail. And I fail. The fun is in the failure. Right?
Yeah.
The fun is in the experimentation.
Absolutely. I agree with you. You know, and it's funny because a lot of people will say to me, like, what are you doing now? Like, I can't, but to me, it feels natural. It's just like, okay, well, this thing happened. Okay. So we have new information now. You know, I can't operate by the old plan, the old paradigm, because I have new information. And, you know, it's really opened up my life in so many ways, you know. So the way I got into this producing thing is, so in 2017, after the Carnegie Hall show, I didn't get out of bed for a week. I like straight up just was in bed. And the Me Too Harvey Weinstein news hit, and all this stuff started coming out. And the way I saw other musicians act about it, and the things that I heard, I was like, I need to take a step back. First of all, I'm burnt out. Second of all, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. I don't know that I want to be in these rooms anymore. And so I said, okay, I'm going to take 6 weeks off. And then I said, I'm going to take a month off. Then I said 2 months. Then I said, all right, 6 more months. And it kept getting, the hiatus from music kept getting longer. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to try different things. I tried roller derby. And I took a stand-up comedy class, and I ended up meeting the person who's one of my best friends now. And in roller derby, I met who's now my fiance. And the three of us became really good friends, like really close, really quickly. And we sort of, what started as a joke one day when we were at dinner, became this idea for a TV show. And we were like, okay, well, let's write this. Let's have it read. Let's see. And Diane, our co-writer, sorry, let me do not disturb.
Okay, I turned on Do Not Disturb.
I usually remember to do that.
Siri?
I usually remember to do that, and I didn't, so I apologize.
Today's Big Talk will have Maria Incontrera and Siri.
And don't forget to turn off your notifications.
Don't forget to turn off your notifications. See, now if you had a good VA. So you have this joke at dinner, and the joke is what turns into what's about to go on Amazon Prime? Is this
No.
This is the, or there was a show before this?
There was a show before this. So
Yes.
we actually shot a pilot this summer. The show is called Two Anxious Bisexuals. And it's a story about me and my friend Diane, and it's this joke because we think somebody tried to set us up. And that's how we met. Because she was in a different section of the comedy course, and you know, this woman that was in my class was like, I want to have a workshop, and then she was like 45 minutes late, and so Diane and I sat in this coffee shop awkwardly and got to know each other. And so, like,
Brilliant.
Yeah. So a year later, I was like, I think she tried to set us up, and so that became the joke. It became a TV show. We had kind of a closed reading of it, and we had some producer interest. And so we've been quietly pitching that, basically.
I would totally watch that show.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's so like, you can just see the nervous, the eyes, the looking around, the like awkward small talk, right? And then like the friendship that blooms from that. Oh, that's really
exactly. And so it's a very exaggerated version of what happened. Like, there are things that happen. Obviously, you have to make it funny. You have to make it crazy. And so we started writing this holiday special. I had this idea, and I was like, you know what? I want this to come out on Christmas. I want this to come out in December. And it's the first. It turns out, and I didn't know this when I was writing it, it's the first holiday rom-com featuring non-binary lead characters.
Really?
So yeah. So our lead actor is a non-binary person, and our romantic lead is a trans non-binary person. And it just is. There's no coming out story. There's no, oh, my parents rejected me. There's no queer trauma. It's just a fun story, because I think we deserve that too.
Yes. Yeah. I thought one of the most beautiful things about Schitt's Creek was that David never came out. He just was. He just was. And my younger son is gay, and he never came out. We just sort of waited for him to invite us in. It was like literally when they handed him to me in the hospital, I was like, there's something different about him than our first one. I don't know what it is, but there's just, the words I said were, there's a sweetness about him. Now, I will tell you, he's not sweet. He's sassy. He's sarcastic. He's snarky. He's not sweet. But I was like, there's a sweetness. There's something different. And by the time he was like 3, I was like, I think maybe. And by the time he was 5, I was like, yep. And it's funny because it's like when I was growing up, people had to come out. It was like the rest of us heteros got to own your sexuality, and we got to own your identity. And it's so interesting to me that we are starting to see characters who just are.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, even from, 15 years ago or a little bit more now than when I was coming out, right? It's so different. Kids these days, they just are, I have a friend who has, I guess their kid is 10 now, but when the kid was about 8, walked into the room, said, "Hey, this is my name, and by the way, my pronouns are they, them," and they never looked back. They started, calling the kid by their name and started using they, them pronouns. And on social media, when the kid's not around, I was like, this would never have happened when I was growing up, ever.
Never. There were whole seasons that were dedicated to the one character coming out, and the Sturm and the Drang, and how are people going to think? And of course, always the father rejects the kid, and there's always, it's just so, and that's not the way, it's not the way it has to be, and it is still the way it is in so many places. And the more we see characters like the ones that you're writing, the more that experience becomes unusual, and the experience that you're trying to show becomes usual.
Exactly. And it's funny because when we showed Two Anxious Bisexuals, some of the feedback that we got was, well, where's the queer trauma? And I was like, this is a comedy. Like, I'm sorry. What?
So so that's my question. So are you getting pushback from, some of the networks that are saying, well, we need a little bit more of this, like if it bleeds, it leads, right? So we need a little bit more of the drama, the trauma, like what people are expecting. How do you respond to that?
Well, we it's funny because the sort of the most promising feedback that we've gotten is from people actually in the business who are like, this needs to be on TV, and so that's been really promising, and people in the business have also, of course, pushed back and, said it's sort of on the more creative end where I think people are urgent to see themselves in the story, and they really want to see this or that on TV that they haven't seen before. So I'm getting a lot of that, which I think is a good thing, because that means that people are identifying, right? They're saying, now I want to see me in this, which is awesome, but I feel pretty promising about the fact that, we're starting to get some real good feedback about what people are hearing and seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I love the themes that run throughout all your stories about authenticity and integrity and sort of knowing who you are and staying true to that, right? Like deciding whether or not you're going to stay in the music industry, in the music scene, based on how people are acting and the feedback that you're getting and the way people treat people. And you could probably, I would argue, and maybe I'm wrong about this, given how talented you are, be very quickly very successful writing the traditional stuff that people are used to seeing. And so to choose this path is it's a harder path. And also, it's true and authentic to who you are.
Yeah. And, I mean, I don't know. I appreciate that. First of all, I appreciate you saying that. I don't know that I would be successful at the traditional stuff. I maybe I would, maybe
your heart just wouldn't be in it. It wouldn't be as good, you think?
Exactly. But I think I would just like hate it. I would probably just, think I was mediocre or whatever, like I'd rather write something that nobody's ever written before, and have 5 people watch it, which is sometimes like, it's not the most commercially viable thing. I mean, however, I also have like Broadway aspirations, you know what I mean? Like I have the big aspirations. I would love to see our show on Netflix, for instance. Yes. I'd love to be on HBO. But I'd almost rather stick with our core crowd and say, all right, what do you want to see?
Yes. Right. Yes. Yeah. So that's a really interesting thing. I think so much of business, we're told like bigger, better, faster, more. You need to grow your social platform. You have to, have millions of followers and all the rest. And, given the sort of day job, right, of social media and helping people create their platforms, it's funny because I struggle with this myself as I try to figure out, like, how do I do the research for the next book? How do I build my platform at the same time? How do I have a big enough network where if 20% of them pre-buy the book, boom, New York Times bestseller? but then, I could say like I need 50,000 people on my mailing list, but really what I need is like 10,000 who adore what they're getting, right? And
Right.
so that's the difference between this like breadth and depth. Do you find that a lot with your clients, that they come in thinking breadth and you have to explain to them sort of that there's like, followers and fans and they're very different?
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, because I work with entrepreneurs and leaders and everything, I think that for the most part, people are aware of the fact that, you don't serve everybody, you serve a niche, right? And that niche, even if it's 50, 100,000 people over time, it's still 0.0000001 of the market, right?
Mm.
So it still is a niche in a way. I think for the most part, people understand that. Of course, I do have people who come to me and are like, "Can you make me go viral?" You know,
Sure, let's put that on the list.
right?
Easy.
And the answer is, maybe there are other social media consultants out there that will answer differently, but my answer is always, I can't make you go viral. You have to have the right content in order to go viral. That's very important because you don't know what your market wants, and so, yeah, we could buy followers, we could buy likes, we could do all that stuff, but we can't make it happen.
It really is such lightning in a bottle, like
Yeah.
it's why is this book successful and that one's not? Why is this person put on stage for $50,000 and that one's lucky to get 500? It's fascinating to me,
Yeah.
the whimsy of the market, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, and the truth is, you're right that, if I take two people, right, who do the exact same thing, who have the exact same amount of time in the business, they serve the same people, they're even their social media platforms look completely different, and what works for one doesn't work for the other. So, it really is. It's you have to be present, you have to keep showing up, keep putting yourself out there, and be ready, because when that thing does go viral, and you get 50,000 views on LinkedIn, or 200,000 whatever's on Instagram, you have to be ready for it.
Yeah, it is. So that's the wonder help piece, right?
Right.
So
Right.
so for me, like, I put out Limitless. It ends up being successful beyond my wildest plans or dreams or hopes or frankly strategies. I mean, I worked very hard, and I also got very lucky. And it was amazing, wonderful, incredible, and also the catching up and the filling in foundation under the house that I built by accident was exhausting, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
hell piece of it. So how are you preparing? How do you, as you're creating, the very queer holiday that's going to be on Amazon Prime mid-December, how are you planning on managing that process? Like, should it take off? When it takes off? What are you going to do? Are you preparing in advance for a flop or a
Yeah.
success, or like what are you going to do?
So, and I learned this the hard way, right? Like, I didn't prepare for Carnegie Hall, the Wonder Hell, and for Carnegie Hall.
Right.
I in the past I haven't prepared, right? And
So you were
so
in bed for a week. Right.
exactly, and I don't want that to happen again, right? So what I committed to this time was I invested in structures, right? Instead of doing the publicity myself, I hired a publicist. I'm sure I could do the publicity myself, right? First of all, it wouldn't be that good because I don't like talking about myself, as you know.
I appreciate that you're letting me explore around and pull all this out of you. I know this is hard.
My adjectives were not what they are now, thanks to Laura. So I invested in the structures, and I, part of what we did was we invested in SAG actors, right? Because I knew I wanted pros, right? And we have some real pros next to some aspiring artists, right? And our show. So I feel that investing in the things to make it the best possible invest in the things you can control, and then the rest you just have to kind of let it go to the universe. And also, like, make sure you take care of yourself, because my gosh, I don't intend on being in bed on December 20th, when, the day after we have our Amazon watch party. That's not happening. I have to be up. I have to be ready. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unless you're in bed with a massive hangover from celebrating.
Right.
But yeah, so you have to be ready. You have to be ready because, it's going to go on TV. And if for nothing else, it is headlines because it will be the first of, right? It'll be you are breaking the rules of like what we normally see on Hallmark, right? You're breaking the rules on all the expectations about these like holiday theme romantic comedies, like you know how the story goes. And even just with the characters and how you've written the characters and then how their story plays out, how we meet them, who they are when we meet them, and the whole story. There's so many rules that you're breaking along the way. You'll get a lot of fans for that, but you're also going to get a lot of hate mail too.
Oh yeah.
How are you preparing for that part of it?
So it's funny, post-election, post all the craziness, I got into a comment thread that was a little controversial. And the person that I was sort of talking with, he apparently looked at my profile and said, well, you're nothing but a skinny goof with a rainbow flag waving over your head. And I realized that he had looked at my profile because I have my very queer holiday with the rainbow above it. And I was like, oh, all right. Well, thank you. That's actually a really big compliment.
Thank you for doing your homework, sir.
First of all, skinny, thank you. Second of all, you're referring to the thing that I'm having on Amazon Prime. Like, you know what I mean? And so I feel like I could have gotten mad. I could have gotten like really angry. I could have let that ruin my day. Or I could have just said, well, you're not my people, right? You're taking a rainbow flag as an insult. Well, clearly you're not my people, and so I think that's at least how I plan to take it, because of course, people are going to leave Amazon reviews. I'm sure that not everybody's going to like the fact that, that our lead person has rainbow colored hair, or that I'm sure not everybody's going to like that, but that's okay.
Yes.
We've put it out there. We've made the offering.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I got trolled on Twitter by Ann Coulter at one point. He told me that I was an anti-Christian white male hater, which is funny because I'm married to a Christian white male. But the hate that I got, it wasn't just substantive hate. I mean, it was like it was hate against me as a human, right? I got a lot of like, oh, that woman of Ashkenazi descent. I'm like, okay, I think you just called me a Jew, which I am, but I don't think you meant it as a compliment, right? I mean, there was a lot of really, like rape threats and death threats, and I'll teach you what it really means. So, I mean, it was like a lot of, it got a little scary and a little dangerous at one point. And then they started finding pictures of my kids and like reposting those. And it was pretty terrifying. So the like, they're not my people was fine. And then it got scary, but then it kind of got a little laughable. Like they're like keyboard warriors. So people are going to write this horrible, horrible stuff about you, about your fiance, about your friends, about the actors. And I think, they like never read the comments is great advice, but it's hard not to read the comments.
Yeah. And I will say I've been there, I've been there, you don't become one of the only 4 women band leaders without hearing something like that, without hearing, oh, she's, any number of words, right?
Insult, homophobic slur here, right?
Exactly, or misogynistic nonsense that people say, you know what I mean? So like I've been there, and it's really hard. It is really hard in the moment to sit there and be like, wow, he just said that to me, right? Or like, like in your case, like it's really hard to feel unsafe.
Yes.
When somebody's making a death threat over, finding pictures of your, oh my gosh, finding pictures of your kids. I can't even imagine.
Oh, it's just crazy. And yet at the same time, you just have to figure like hurt people, right? So like
Right.
like imagine the kind of pain that somebody has to be carrying around inside their heart to sit down and write a horrible review of something that
Right.
has come from a place of love. Like
Right.
imagine how sad that
Right.
is.
Right. Exactly. You know, it's funny because I have a book out on Amazon, and one person reviewed it and said, I refuse to read this because I don't like the type. You know what I mean? Like if you really look at what's behind these things, it's a lot of, you're right, it's a lot of pain. It's
Mhm.
a lot of like I see that kind of thing and I almost want to be like, who hurt you? You know?
Yes. It is true. I wish I could just respond to half those comments like, "Oh, cupcake, who hurt you?" Because it's so true. It's so true. Or, people who will like read my book and say, "I couldn't read this book. It's too political." And I'm like, "There's a story about how I went to go work in the Clinton White House. It's in
Right.
my bio. The book isn't political. That's just where I was working." Like that.
Right.
It's like, I'm not trying to talk you into anything. It's incredible to me, but I think people do see what they want to see, right?
Yeah.
People will see what they want to see in the characters, and maybe they'll see some of the struggle because depending on how your actors act it, right? Like the snarky joke they make carries a lot of pain, and you feel that because you remember making the joke, or all the wonderful
Right.
things that I know that you've written into this. So as you're thinking about the how you're managing the hell, what about the wonder side of it? I mean, you have big aspirations. Like, I believe that wonder hell is only as big as your own ego, right?
Yeah.
And the burden of potential that you feel like you wrote, Two Anxious Bisexuals, you're starting to get some traction, you're starting to get some responses. You've got The Very Queer Holiday coming out on Amazon Prime, and you've got these great actors and you're hearing really good feedback. So there's a part of you that's like, this could be big, right? I want to be on Broadway. Like, we've got big
Yeah.
plans.
Yeah.
Like, I think that you feel that potential, and that potential is both exciting and also a little stress inducing because
Oh,
it means you have to
absolutely.
live up to it. You can't unsee it, right? When you imagine Broadway, you can't unsee this on Broadway. So
Right.
how are you managing that piece of it, the wonder side of it, and the ego and the ambition that you have?
Well, I yes, I
Which I
have.
love,
Yeah. It, and I think that you're absolutely right. Like, it's hard to manage. It's really hard to manage because you see the potential of the thing, right?
Mhm.
And not everybody does, and it's hard. It's really, really hard. I think I have to remind myself, for me personally, this is what I do. I have to remind myself to take weekends off. I have to remind myself that it's okay to just chill out and play games
Mm.
and read a book sometimes and go for a walk and not be productive, because I do get very caught up in what's going to happen, because I know that when I commit to something, I make something amazing happen. I've done it time and time again in my life. So I also have to manage the good, because that stuff is really stressful too. you
Mm.
know um and I love
Managing the good.
yeah, and I love the term wonder help, because that's exactly what it is. Like, I couldn't have said it better myself. Like, you put it into one word.
Well, it sort of came out of this burst of creativity and that moment of, "Oh my God, I'm so exhausted. I can't even like write in English. So I'm just going to make up words."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I just made up a word. But I like that concept of managing the good. Like, I think when I tell this to people about Wonder Hell, people are like, "Oh, so you're going to write a book about how we get through Wonder Hell?" And I'm like, "No, I want to write a book about how we live inside of Wonder Hell." Because when you put this out on Amazon Prime and it's this huge success, and then it goes to Broadway, and suddenly you have a new Wonder Hell of managing it on Broadway, because now you're like, we're going to win Tony Awards, right? And then and then what about the next show and the next
right,
show, and how do we do this?
right.
So every time we climb to the next mountain, we see another range out, that's ahead of us. And so there's constantly more wonder hell. And so the book isn't going to be about surviving wonder hell. It's about thriving in it and welcoming it and learning from it and enjoying it. So I think I've done 40 interviews at this point, and managing the good. This is the first time that I've heard this idea. And I love it because we spend so much time thinking about how do we
Yeah,
manage the bad. But
Right.
how do we manage the good is a really wonderful framing of taking time to know that this is just the space that you're in. Like, this is the liminal space, and it's okay to float around in it for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's funny because the managing the good is real. I mean, I don't want to sound like, you know, the embarrassment of riches here, or poor, you know, poor me, poor me. But there were moments, you know, I mean, I thought of this on October 15th, right? I was like, we're gonna do this. It's half written. Let's finish it and do it. There have been moments where I was just like, that's it, I'm canceling the whole thing. You know, there were moments where I was like, what am I doing? What the hell am I doing? I'm really stressed out. Why did I put myself through this? Right. And, you know, thank goodness I have a very, very patient partner. I have a very, very patient collaborator, right? We sort of talk each other through that, but that's real. That is a real thing that has happened. And, you know, for a relatively non-stressful production, right? A relatively low budget, relatively small, relatively easy thing, I still had that moment of like, oh my God, enough is enough. I'm throwing in the towel. And like, you really have to work past that, because all that's happened are good things, right? But your ego just cares that you're alive. It doesn't care that you're happy, right? So when change happens, it, even if it's the best change in the world, your subconscious, your body is going to react. So I think being prepared for that is really important.
Oh, I think that is so wise. When you said that you had to work through it and you had to keep going, were there certain things? I mean, was it your partner saying like, I know you can do this, we can do this? Were there specific things that you did that when you had like that panic button moment, I want to just pull the plug, that kept you going?
Yeah, I mean, you know, first of all, my partner's amazing, and she's the person who, when I freak out, she's like, okay, step by step. Number one, what's the first thing we do? You know, so that helps. But I definitely have had to talk myself down from that ledge before, right? So I have my own coping mechanisms. I know that it's like time to just chill and watch Netflix for a little while, and like maybe play some video games, and you know, have a night off for myself, and you know, really come back the next morning and make an informed decision. And the decision is always, okay, let's keep going because this is awesome, you know. So
Yeah.
and like, I'm just freaking out because I'm me, right?
Yes.
Human.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know if you know, my friend Rahaf Harfouche. She was actually the first interview that I did for Big Talk, and she wrote a book called Hustle and Float, and it was all about how she had written a book. She was going around the world speaking, super successful, and then she just stopped being able to write. Like, she just couldn't do it, and she couldn't get out of bed. And she and her sister started
Yeah.
studying people who were super creative and also super productive. And they started studying their work habits, and they really uncovered all this stuff about creativity and where it comes from. And we think that we can just schedule in time to create, right? You got to keep hustling, keep creating, and really, it comes out of the float times. So
Yep.
it reminds me a lot of what you're saying about how you manage this, and it's backed up by science. So what you're
Yeah.
go play more video games. It's backed up by science. So I know that I could talk to you all day, but I know that we have to come to an end here because we do this for an hour, and I'm going to get to talk to you again on your show, right? Coffee with Entrepreneurs. So that's going to be exciting. But more exciting for me is December 19th. There's going to be a watch party. How do we all watch A Very Queer Holiday? Because I can't wait to watch it.
Yay. So the easiest way to do it is go to averyqueerholiday.com and do the sign up thing, and you'll get your you'll get a weekly email and a reminder and everything. There's also a Facebook invite event for the watch party. And if you sign up for the email list, there will be a little special gift that you get to see some of the content early.
Ooh.
So yes, do sign up there and enjoy. And remember that none of this takes itself too seriously. So just have fun with it, and hopefully you fall in love with some of these people, because we definitely have.
Oh, I can't wait. So December 19th, averyqueerholiday.com. I'm going to sign up. We're going to watch it. I cannot wait. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.